You make partner, and in your mind, it was a fluke.
Everyone else was having like celebratory dinners, and I was walking around like the sky had fallen.
Welcome to the Evolve Voices podcast, a platform to hear the fascinating stories behind the people that power global commerce. I'm Edilsa, a brand advisor, and your US host of Evolve Voices. Some people chase success their whole lives, and for some, the chase can take a cost you don't see coming. Today, we hear from former Chief Brand Officer and now mental health advocate Michael Stutts. He got his start at the Boston Consulting Group, where he quickly learned what it means to push, compete, and measure yourself against the very best. And he became one of them, eventually serving as a C-suite executive at Bloomin Brands, Azamara Cruises, Dollar Shave Club. But this episode, it isn't about titles or accomplishments. It's about what drives someone to keep pushing, the need for validation, and the cost of being an overachiever. Michael's story takes us from the intense corridors of BCG to the personal moments that forced him to ask, am I doing this for me or just to prove something to everyone else? And the moments that almost broke him along the way, including this day. The day he made partner. When you make partner, what a great blessing. One of 40 people to be granted at one of the top firms this prestigious position. And in your mind, it was a fluke. You know, that was how your mind was wired. That's not something people are seeing, right? Is that what anxiety can look like at work? Maybe something that maybe is not, it's invisible to people, but it's obvious for you internally. What does that look like?
Well, it's how a mind that is not being treated, whether it's by medication or by, just psychological conversations, it's how it can perceive something that to anybody else in the world would be a wonderful thing. It was a stealing of joy. That's a phrase I use a lot. All of the joy of being promoted to partner was stolen by, I only made it because a series of strange events that all led to, them thinking that I'm any good, or it's because I know these people, or because this is all some big elaborate joke to see me fail. And oh my gosh, now I've got to learn an entirely new set of practices and things. And oh my gosh, I've got to generate revenue. All these things. It's like a whole new selection of points of failure were introduced to me that all at once I was putting on myself right there in that moment. So it was on a Thursday that I found out. And from that Thursday until Sunday, I just constantly was at an elevated heart rate and tipsy.
Wow.
I just drank my way through it.
How soon does that kick in? Like, I always wonder, like, you hear the news. Is there a moment where you just call your mom, call your significant other? How soon did it kick in?
I was driving, and when I found out, like, I got the phone call, Bluetoothed it, hey, the vote just happened, it's done. And it's not one of these big climactic moments. You kind of know that it's coming.
Yeah.
Immediately, I started freaking out and was like, oh gosh, now it's real, now it's real, now it's real. And I got home as fast as I could just to like sit on the couch and stare ahead. And, everyone else in my cohort that got promoted was having like celebratory dinners and hanging out with their friends and their families and whatever, making a fun purchase. And I was walking around like the sky had fallen.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not fun. And it's these irrational pulling forward, borrowing of worry, borrowing disaster that hadn't happened yet. That was a big moment for me of saying, why are you allowing whatever's going on in your head that is, again, it's part nature, part nurture, whatever's going on, you've just got to end this cycle and you've got to get real help. And that was the first time that I, really got serious about it and started exploring medication and started, really thinking this is bigger than me. And it didn't take, I guess it didn't take as quickly as I thought it would. I still had a ways to go before I found the bottom. That was a really crappy moment that should have been awesome.
When he told me that story, what stayed with me wasn't the title or the celebration everyone else was having. It was the drive home. That moment where something you've worked towards for years finally happens. And instead of relief, your body does the opposite. Your heart races, your thoughts spiral, you reach for something, anything to quiet it. And I kept thinking, if success feels like this, What does that say about how we're chasing it? The primary driver was this validation piece. One of those was coming from your dad, and all of us have it. I have myself a handicapped brother, and I almost felt like I had to prove that I could do just that much more and fill space, that I could, be outside, that I could, achieve this level that my parents as immigrants had never done, or that my brother couldn't physically do. That was my role. For you, it was your father. But what I thought was interesting wasn't so much that you look to your father for validation. It was what happened when he passed away. So your father passes away, and you write that actually there the potential validation disappears, but it still sticks with you. Can you take me back to that moment of what it felt like, losing your dad and what had been the source of your validation for so long?
I'm not unique.
Yeah.
My story is not powerful in that, oh my gosh, there was some huge hardship. I grew up with a great family, loved my dad, loved my mom. They did the best they could. I had lots of advantages growing up. Yeah. And I say that because people specifically like me who, there's no visible reason why something bad like a mental breakdown should happen, but slow builds can happen and normal people can experience it. So, the short, not so sob story. My parents got divorced when I was young. My dad moved to Florida. My mom and dad both got remarried pretty quickly, had the whole split family experience. Then my dad had more kids later in life. I started showing signs very young that something wasn't right in the way that I think about things. I mean, you can guess, like I did a high-end consulting job. Like, yeah, I am blessed with some level of brain processing capacity, but it was my best asset and my worst enemy, because there was something in my brain that allowed irrational thoughts to enter, and then it would get trapped in there. And then my brain would decide that that was reality. And I'll give you examples of it. School is a dangerous place. And I don't know where I picked that up, but my entire 5th and 6th grade, those 2 years, I wasn't sleeping on Sunday nights because I was scared of what was going to happen at school. And like, I promise you, my school was not dangerous, but it was in there. And there was nothing anybody could say to make that change. And I think there was probably, many, many years of psychological experience, psychological sessions. Later, I can tell you that a lot of that was my feeling of security being taken away from me because divorce and, cliche. So because my dad was focused on raising more kids, rightfully, he was looking to more to them and less to me and my sister. And I just sort of missed out on this feeling of validation and security. And I don't know, there's just something missing. And then when fast forwarding to when my dad passed away, he was sick for 9 months, and I had this beautiful vision of everything, all validation coming at once. And then it didn't. And that's fine. He, like I said, he did the best he could. But from that moment on, I felt this, in some parts a good way, a freedom to go explore the world. Because I spent my first 26 years trying to impress my dad. And, according to my aunts, it worked. But he wasn't the type to give that kind of validation. Once he was passed away, I said, okay, great. Now I'm going to go pursue whatever it is I want to do. And I don't feel any guardrails anymore. Like I said, in a good way, I saw parts of the world I'd never seen. In a bad way, I explored without limit, work, all of the many, many hours that come with that. What I would call maybe unhealthy amounts of travel, distraction. Because I did have some unresolved pain inside. And then I entered this world of a high stress job and all of this seeking validation and the double edge of that sword. And it just goes, it escalates. And next thing you know, you're starting to introduce some behaviors that are coping mechanisms, like drinking, like, again, just any form of distraction you can find. Yeah. And slowly you shamefully realize that what your guiding principles are here, and you've sort of veered off here. And there comes a point where you just don't even recognize how you're behaving anymore. And I think ultimately what led me to a dark place, that gap between what I believed my true identity was and what I believed my identity had become, and that I hated it. I hated that identity. Yeah. But I didn't do anything about it. And that's that eventually that will collapse into one in a bad way, which is what happened in
Yeah,
2020.
before we move into the stories, what I think was interesting about that is like having somebody to validate you isn't, it's also toxic, right? It's like you're constantly seeking their own validation. But it's almost like when you lost that validation, it also helped it contributed to the spiral. Was it because he was your guardrail for validation and all of a sudden it's like, where do I get it?
I wasn't getting it consistently from anywhere based
Yeah,
on what,
yeah, yeah.
my mom, if she ever hears this, is going to say, but I told you how wonderful you are you are all the time. And that is true. And I've told her this before, that sometimes if it's all coming from one place, then it becomes like, is that really authentic? And that's a whole
You don't
different
believe it. Again, people who are overachievers don't believe
They don't
validation.
believe it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's the whole thing when you get a review and there's 50 things that are good and 3 things that need improvement. Who cares about the 50? I'm only interested in those 3. So, yeah, anyway, as I just kept moving further and further away, then, it gets to this point where it's almost like a point of no return. And you just realize one day it's all bad. And whether it's true or not, and again, it's that same kernel of, you are not of value to the world in the way that you once were, because you veered so far off in a direction that you don't like.
Yep.
Nobody else will be any worse off if you're gone.
Yep.
And that's the seed of the thought that led to an ultimate collapse.
Listening to him talk about looking to his dad for validation, it clicked for me that the need to be seen to be enough are hallmarks of an overachiever. The drive isn't just ambition, it's a constant check. Am I doing enough? Am I enough? And when you can't generate that answer from inside yourself, you overcompensate, overprepare, overplan, overperform, all to get that little spark of proof that yes, I matter. It's not just someone who wants to succeed, it's someone who has to, someone who wants to make failure impossible because the alternative, even for a moment, feels absolutely unbearable. And if you're nodding along thinking, yeah, I've felt that, you're not alone. Roughly 70% of high performers regularly experience imposter syndrome, doubting their achievements and chasing external validation. And the thing is, it usually starts early and it starts this small. I feel like all of us insecure overachievers know this bit.
Yeah, I was an intern,
Yeah.
and I was traveling all over the place to jewelry stores, pretending that I was, getting engaged to someone. I was shopping for engagement rings, and I did it over and over and over again. And I felt so silly, and was like, this is not really the job I was imagining when I was at my highfalutin, MBA school and going to this big fancy firm. But I was like, that this is going to pay off. And it did, when it was like 2 a.m. one night, a big meeting got moved a week ahead. And I was asked to make one slide that was the difference between the experience at, retailer A, B, C,
Right.
and how to position the brand. In the first pass, I got it right. And the partner yelled from the other room, "Oh my gosh, this is great," whatever. And that was the foundation of my, I think what got me on the road to eventually making partner at BCG. It sounds like a silly thing, but then down the road, when I was, one of the senior managers, whatever we called it back then, principal, I had 2 interns that I tasked them to go to every location of a fast food restaurant in the Dallas area. And one of them said, "Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yes. Here's the plan. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's the data I'm going to take." And the other person said, "Do I really have to go to all of them?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I know which one of you is going to succeed here. And I know which one of you I relate to more. And I know which one is probably not. In a world of insecure overachievers, that's not insecure overachiever behavior." Was that person rational and practical? Yeah, they probably didn't need to go to every single one of them. But, that's what we do. We kind of overdo it and over prepare, but that's fine. It does pay off in the long run. So it's not all bad being an insecure overachiever.
No.
It comes with some side effects. Let's put it that way.
I'm one of them. All of us have, I feel like we have to be, right? Like, should I be concerned?
It would be awesome if there were easy ways of spotting things. I was there with a lot of people who were, again, pretty normal people you'd see in your everyday life. And there was a CEO there. There were multiple doctors there. There were some I would call it, bored rich people. And not bored as in they were so bored they could go there.
Yeah.
Bored meaning like they had some problems. What I've learned and tried to observe and act on is what you just said of unexpected reactions to things that are reasonably predictable. And if somebody is acting in a way that is just counterintuitive, that's a signal.
I'm curious about how it shows up at work. You write about a moment of extreme discipline. You lose 70 pounds in 4 months.
Yeah.
You were running at 2 a.m. so you wouldn't miss a day.
Yeah.
Did colleagues see that as normal, or did anyone see it as this is maybe a mental health signal?
The irony of that is, all right, so I mentioned I used alcohol as a coping mechanism. I was also working in an environment that was very alcohol forward. We worked hard, we played hard, blah, blah, blah. And so, increasing alcohol use was not a red flag to anybody. But one day when I start showing up a little skinnier, a lot skinnier, and then WTF, that was the only time anyone has really pulled me aside and said, like, hey, you good? And this was 12 years before, ultimately things went way south. But, we'll find validation in anything. And the scale will validate you. But yeah, that was the only time anybody really said, like, dude, you need to maybe, like, what's going on here?
Yep.
And I was like, no, I'm just losing weight. This is great. It was definitely not healthy. Part of the mission that, I've been on for years now is normalize talking about it and pointing it out at the workplace.
Yep.
Because where else are people going to see you every day besides your family? And if you're like me and you live alone, like, it's really the only place people are going to see you consistently and can see your response to positive and negative stimulus.
Totally. I do think there are external ones that maybe manifest, either something that you're like, somebody's clearly filling up their time. So normal things is, yes, as a consultant, I think you talked about their 1,600 takeoffs and landings you had over that time. Yes, you're expected to fly a lot. But then there's like, in a year, you're attending all these really high profile concerts, which is really cool. The Super Bowl, the Final Four, and Kentucky Derby that you went to in 1 year. That's pretty bad. You went to 63 Bruce Springsteen concerts.
Yes.
I mean, yes, you love him, but at the same time, wow, that's a lot, And when you look at all of that together, like, were those symptoms? Were those coping mechanisms?
I think a lot of people just wrote it off as, well, Michael's life is a little different than ours because he's not married and doesn't have kids and he can go do whatever. Right. For me, I think there's part of it that's just my personality that loves to live life. And part of it was stay moving so that your own intrusive thoughts can't catch up to you. The best way I can explain what's different between those times and now, meaning the last 3 years since I've really, really, really taken things seriously, is I don't feel the need to chase sports and concerts as much as I used to. I still go to them, but it's not like an obsessive thing. I guess in your parlance, it was a system. It was a symptom.
Yeah,
and it was both a symptom and a short-term cure. But the real underlying, I think the real underlying issues were just from a brain chemistry standpoint, the way that it works, and just from my own life experience, just some perceived gaps in my life that I really didn't like and wanted to fill, but had no way of doing it.
I'm like, shoot, like, how can I tell? Maybe there's internal things going on. Is that a signal?
I've been in a workplace where 2 different times we experienced suicides of our employees. And one of them, I saw him at whatever the end of the workday, and next morning he didn't show up. And then the second time I was riding the elevator with the kid, and I'd interviewed him, a year before, and I met his parents just walking around Dallas one day. And then one day I'm riding the elevator with him, asking how things are going. And at 11:30 a.m., everything went haywire, and we found out that he had jumped off the building.
Oh my God.
And I remember thinking, like, it's not like I saw something obvious and could have thrown myself in front of this, but I just was wondering, like, man, it's not so much a wonder as it is a takeaway. I'd much rather somebody tell me I'm fine, stop asking, than to wonder, should I have asked if you're fine? So, and that's my free advice to anybody is like, accept the weirdness in the short term to not have the, man, I wish I'd said something in the long term.
What struck me here is how normal this all at times sounded. Losing weight because you're stressed, using music to cope. I think back to my own early career when I was running myself ragged, often coming straight from a One Oak after party to work, 2 sheets to the wind, thinking this was all fine. From the outside looking in, nobody would have guessed anything was off. And it made me wonder, how would you know when you've crossed the line? When it's no longer just being driven, but something else entirely. All of us are anxious to a certain degree. When do you know that it's, an actual mental health issue that you should take care of? To put it bluntly, who belongs in a psych ward?
Yeah, I mean, I knew, I felt like I had something wrong when I was, 8, 9, 10 years old. But you grow up in the bougie neighborhood in Charlotte, going to, the fancy schools, and it's just back then in the 80s, you just didn't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like a badge of honor. I don't worry about this next generation. I think they're probably overdoing it. That's fine. I knew that I had to take this extra seriously after a handful of years of taking my, low levels of Lexapro and, going to weekly or biweekly psychology appointments. I knew the day that I made the decision and the plan of here's how I'm going to do it.
He meant the moment he decided he was going to end his life. March 30th, 2022, driving from Charlotte to Chapel Hill. Somewhere on that drive, he made a plan. And what's chilling is what came next. Life didn't screech to a halt. He called his mom. He went to her house. He still flew to New Orleans for the Final Four, still watched Duke versus UNC, still watched the national championship, still had his sister come visit. From the outside, it all looked intact, busy, functional, almost normal. It wasn't until days after all of that his sister finally said, "You can't keep doing this," and helped him get somewhere safe. A psych ward, a place where someone else could hold the weight he'd been carrying. And that's the part that won't leave me. How long can someone live inside a decision like this while everything around them keeps moving? How close "I'm fine" can sit next to "I've already decided"? And how much we hope for them all to come on the other side. What would you have told yourself when you made partner?
I would have said, oh my gosh, this is one of the most amazing accomplishments. Like, you should be so proud of yourself. Can you believe this happened? So on and so forth. And meanwhile, I told myself, here's a whole new way of failing.
Yeah.
So, and there's little things. It's, you are, you should be ashamed of how you acted last night. Or, that was pretty crazy. I mean, it happens to everybody. Don't worry about it. Everyone else has moved on. It's cool. Like, there's just little things that you can tell yourself as you tell a friend. So that's number one. Treat yourself as you treat your friend. Number two, really embrace the notion that nobody's thinking about you as much as you are thinking about you. Mm-hmm. And for someone like me who deals with shame and guilt a lot, that's been super valuable. Just knowing that, like, I might be going over and over and over again something bad in my head, and I did something, I said something. Just remember, nobody's thinking about you. They're thinking about what they are having for dinner tonight. They're thinking about their own problems. They're thinking about their own mistakes, their own shame. So just be liberated by that. And then the third big one is when you're in a situation that you think is awful and that you think is the end of the world or whatever, ask yourself, when I'm on my deathbed, is this something I'm going to be thinking about? And I would say for myself, like, all except for maybe 2 or 3 things in my life that have happened that I've considered really bad or dramatic or something, like most all of them, no, I will not be thinking about them on my deathbed. So just contextualizing some of the things that you catastrophize. All of these are kind of different forms of catch it and change it, but those 3 things I remind myself all the time.
It all brings me to be nice to yourself. Like, it's like we're so hard on ourselves. And There's a way to be achieving, but also bring yourself up in the best and kindest and most gentle with perspective way possible.
We give others grace. Well, people like me give others grace way more easily than we give ourselves.
As we start to close, because I've monopolized a lot of your time, people often come to you asking with questions about the psych ward, and they preface it with, "You don't have to answer this, but." So I'm going to take that permission. You list this laundry list of things you weren't allowed to at the psych ward: drawstrings, no shoelaces, no belts,
wired headphones.
No, wait, what did you say?
No wired headphones.
No, okay, the wire. No toiletries with dangerous ingredients. That one was like, okay. There was another one. Nail clippers. That makes sense. Or
no Listerines that has alcohol in it.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like anything that could conceivably get you intoxicated or hang yourself with. They're very, very careful on that, which I'm glad they do. But I had to ruin some perfectly good shorts and get the drawstrings out of them. That was a bummer.
But they also took away from you a gummy bear. What was that about?
It took away one gummy bear. So I brought my bag in, and they do this really, really terrible version of what like TSA PreCheck does, of take every single thing out of your bag and stuff that I didn't even know was in there, like an old paper clip that was wrapped around a presentation from 7 years ago, whatever. And then there was one gummy bear in the bottom. They're like, "Yeah, we're going to go ahead and get rid of this." I'm like, I feel like I meant to bring that gummy bear in here.
Yeah.
What did that gummy bear ever do? Yeah, they take a lot of stuff away from you.
I was like, wait, that's kind of soulless. Like I would have wanted, like, give me a little treat, And then you also mentioned a PowerPoint from a meeting in 2017. Do you remember what that PowerPoint was? Was it something special to you, or was it just something?
It was just something stuck in the bottom. It was just there. It was one of many times you juxtapose like the outside world with where you are now, and it's like, wow, I'm really far away from wherever I was with that, whatever that PowerPoint was in 2017. And you're laying in the bed that night like, wow, this is very different than when I was at the so-and-so Four Seasons somewhere. It's like there are little stark moments like that it's like, gosh, I'm really far away from what I was used to, and probably for the best.
The one thing I was surprised you didn't get caught with, your Mountain Dew.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I went off my DMD for a while.
Yeah.
I took the opportunity to do some cleansing of certain things. Obviously, there's no alcohol or substances or anything in there. I was like, you know what, I'm going to go off my Diet Mountain Dew. And then I had my first one afterwards, and it was glorious.
You know what's incredible is we're talking about this moment in your life, but that was almost 2 to 3 years ago. And so a lot has happened since then. What are you most excited about today, now having these new tools, this new clarity?
My word of 2025, and I plan to keep it in 2026, has been authenticity. And, I'll be pretty unfiltered here. I spent the last 3+ years trying to rebuild a career in the same frame as what I had before things sort of went south, because I spent 4 years in banking, 10 years in management consulting, 3 years as a very senior corporate executive. And I was like, okay, now it's time to restart, but in a different way, but in the same way. So I had another senior corporate job and then another one. And I just found myself earlier this year being like, this doesn't feel real. This doesn't feel like me. And I found myself not fitting into either of those two jobs. And so I've really taken a step back and said, okay, what is my authentic career? And what is my authentic way of living, which isn't in I lived in this big, fancy, stupid house in Tampa, and now I live in an apartment in North Carolina because I'm from North Carolina and this is my home. And living in a little apartment is much more my speed, and it's what I'm used to. And it's great. I love it. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to do something that tapped into something I'm passionate about. And so I'm pursuing opportunities there. I'm spending a lot more time with family. Silly example is that I'm a Carolina Panthers season ticket holder, and my mom and I have developed new traditions of going to the games together, which we didn't really do before. There's just so many things that I'm embracing without the perceived need to do the big jobs and do the big stuff and do what was expected of me at one point. And it's scary as hell.
Oh,
right? Like I have zero income right now. And I am actually, in fact, just spending a bunch of money getting a business started.
yeah.
But I'd rather be doing that and, sleep well at night and be excited about the future than worrying if I'm going to do poorly in a meeting in 3 days. It's very liberating.
Die empty. You want to put it all out there. It's just like you never want the regret that you didn't actually live your fullest, most authentic self. Something like this apartment, making the decision to be in a small apartment. How did you get there?
It was not difficult because this house in Tampa, I had moved in there pretty shortly before all of the bad stuff started happening, right before I left for where I went. And in fact, that's where I was when my sister told me, here's what you need to do. We got to take you to a place. And then that's where I went home to afterwards when my life was completely empty. This thing was just a monumental trophy, a memorial to a life that I wanted nothing to do with anymore. And so I was just miserable in there. And I would just think about it at night, what would be perfect? And what would be perfect is a little apartment in North Carolina. And I sold the house and this is where I am now. And like I said, it's my authentic self. It's
simple. It's what most comes to you. And I think sometimes we overthink things and overcomplicate, but it's really what is the first thing that speaks to you at the end of the day? That's what you should go for.
And I just hired my first employee ever, meaning somebody who's dependent on
you.
Me,
yeah.
Right. It's that's been one of the most fulfilling and awesome and scary things of wow, okay, now somebody believes in me that we're going to start a business together and that we are going to make this happen and it's going to be awesome. And it's pressure, but it's I can't think of better validation than somebody trusting you with their livelihood.
Yep.
And, yeah. And hopefully it works out.
What an experience for Michael. Listening to him, I kept thinking about how many of us are running on that same engine. Checking boxes, chasing validation, convincing ourselves it's fine, and how easy it is to miss the signals that say, maybe it's not. So if any of this feels familiar, consider this your cue to take a step back. Don't wait until someone else has to intervene to remind you that you matter too.
Great! So this was another great episode. Evolve Voices is a podcast from Evolve Commerce Club, the #1 private community, where we connect senior commerce professionals in more than 40 markets. Every week, we invite one expert to share their perspective and their knowledge. If you want to know more about Evolve, look at the link in this episode description to request your invitation. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!